In most cases, as a developer, you are in a tight deadline to get your project completed. Now, there are many things that you can do to speed up your development process, but in this video, I want to show you how to use Gulp and Webpack to speed up your development process. Now, when I say speed up, I'm talking speed up a lot, like 10 times, 20 times faster than you would normally do. Why should we use Gulp or Webpack? Well, Gulp is a task manager or a task runner. You can set up specific tasks to do exactly what you want. For example, you can convert JPEG, PNG files to WebP. You can convert SCSS files to CSS and much more. In this video though, I'm going to show you exactly how to set it up properly, that you can have an SRC file and a distribution file, and you can get Gulp to automatically move the files to these different folders. And with that said, Webpack is great because you can manage JavaScript libraries and you can physically import your SCSS file into a JavaScript file, which means you only import one JS file in the head of your HTML or your web project for that matter. Hey, by the way, make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do post videos like this, design and development videos, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. Okay, so with that said, let's jump into it. Alright, so in the previous part of this video, or in the previous video, we essentially created a base Docker container and we ran our app.py file within. We also used Docker mapping to map our local GitHub repository with our Docker image to ensure that we have that synchronous browsing capability where if we change or make changes to the index.html, it will automatically update within the Docker container. Now that we have the base running, the next step is to set up Gulp, to set up a package.json, and also to set up web config. So let's go ahead and do that. The first and foremost thing I want to do is make sure I open up my integrated terminal. I'm going to right click where my folder explorer is. We're going to say open integrated terminal. Once that is open, the first thing we want to do is type in npm int it. Now what we're doing here is we're creating a package.json file. It's going to ask you a couple of things. So the first question it's going to ask you is, what is the package name? So I'm going to call it Yoga Fitness. Once that is done, it's going to ask you for a version, not super important. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. Next, it's going to ask for a description. So here I like to just say yoga fitness website. And now it's going to ask for an entry point. We're not going to use entry points in this stage. So we're just going to hit enter. Same with test command. In your case, it will show you the actual Git repository. In my case, it's not showing that because I am demoing this in a video. It's also going to ask for keywords and authors and all that kind of good stuff. So go through those questions and just answer them. By the way, if you have a private repository, you don't need to worry about the license. If you're doing this on a public, make sure to add something like MIT. Once you've done and once you've filled everything in, it's going to show you a quick summary of everything. So we're just going to go ahead and hit enter. Now on the left hand side, you're going to notice that it created a package.json file. And when we click on it, it's actually going to show us everything that we want to see. All right, so now that we have our package.json file created, the next step is actually quite fun. It's pretty good. We're going to go ahead and install all the necessary Node.js libraries, plugins, and good stuff. So let's start off with Gulp. I'm going to go ahead in the terminal. I'm going to type in npm and install --global-CLI. Let's start there. All right, so I already have mine installed. That's why mine didn't really do anything. But in your case, you would see that it will physically install the package globally. The next thing I want to do is install Gulp. So I'm going to go npm install --, and we're going to type in save dev, and we're going to say Gulp. Now, I just got a little error there, and the reason for that, I'm just going to press up arrow, and we're just going to get rid of that extra L. We're going to hit enter, and it will install the package for us. So it's installing Gulp. So when you install any kind of Node.js, you'll notice on the left-hand side that it created a Node modules folder. And when you open that up, it's going to add a bunch of files. And the reason why there's so many files is because of all the dependencies that Gulp needs for it to work properly. All right, so now that we have Gulp installed, and by the way, just a little side note, in the description of this video, I do have all the commands added. And where is it added? Well, it's added in the GitHub repository. So when you click on the GitHub link in the video description below, in the README file, I have everything laid out exactly, all the commands that I'm using, all that good stuff. So if I'm going too fast, just know that I do have it in the GitHub README file. All right, so next up, once we've done all that, we need to install quite a few things. The next thing I want to install is the Gulp Webpack. So this is going to allow us to actually convert our JPEG and PNG files. So I'm just going to drop it in there. It's npm install --save dev Gulp Webpack. We're going to install that one. All right, so that just completed. The next one I want to install is the SasS. So very similar, npm install save dev and SasS. We're going to hit enter and get that guy to install. All right, so that installed. The next one I want to install is Webpack. So very similar, npm install, but we're going to do Webpack. And by the way, I'm going to show you why we're installing this here in a second. I just want to get all the installations done. And by the way, there is a command that you can install all of this at once, but I am doing this step by step just to make sure that you are following properly. Once we've installed Webpack, the next one we're going to install is Webpack CLI. So install save dev Webpack CLI. All right, so with that one installed, we are going to install Webpack Stream. So again, npm install webpack-stream. There's a few more that I want to install. I know it's quite a lot. The next one I want to install is Concurrently. This is a great plugin because you can actually execute multiple scripts at the same time. And we are going to play around with this here in a sec. I just want to get everything installed and get that all done. All right, so that one is installed. By the way, you will notice as you install some of these packages, you are going to see stuff like 19 vulnerabilities, 4 moderate, 15 high. Because we are going to host this on GitHub Pages and Azure static websites, this is something not to worry about. But if you were to take this into production, this is something to definitely solve, which is, by the way, a very daunting task to do. But one of the ways that you can fix this is by running npm audit fix and force. Most cases it doesn't work, but in this specific instance, we're not going to worry about this because this is not physically going to be on our production server. All right, so now that we've installed our Concurrently, we've also installed a few others. I want to install CSS loader as well. So npm install CSS loader. So now we've installed that. If you want to keep track on what you've installed, you can navigate over to your package.json. In the package.json, where it says dev dependencies, it will show you what you have installed and what we are going to use throughout this project. So very important and a super easy way to do that. So I can see that we've installed Gulp, we've installed Gulp Webpack, SasS, and we have a few more to install. Not a lot, but a few more. One thing or a few things I want to add is style loader as well as SasS loader. So let's go ahead and install style loader. So to do that, go back to the terminal and we're going to type in style loader and we're going to get this guy to install real quick. All right, so style loader is just done. The next one I want to install, the one I think we don't have, is SasS loader. So again, in the terminal, we're going to type in SasS loader and we're going to get that guy to install. And you're going to notice as you're installing your dependencies, it is going to populate this list, which is great. So we have 1, 2, 4, 6, 8. We have 10 dependencies at this point. The last one I want to install, last but not least, is browser sync. Same thing, npm install save dev browser sync. All right, so now that we have all our dev dependencies installed, we have our package.json, we're going to start off by creating our Gulp file. To do that, we're going to right click on the folder and we're going to say new file and we're going to type in gulp file.mjs. So first thing I want to do is I want it to import Gulp from Gulp. So essentially we are establishing the libraries that we just downloaded, the dependencies. So I imported Gulp, I'm importing Webpack, and we're going to import Webpack Stream. Now, please follow with me here. I will explain as we go along. Don't get discouraged at this point. Trust me, this is all going to work out because once we're done with all this, your entire development process is going to be so straightforward because of the task management manager that we are currently setting up. All right, so the next one I want to import is Webpack, and we're going to say from Webpack. And now we are going to add the configuration part for our Webpack config. So what we're going to do is we're going to add Webpack config, and this is our existing Webpack configuration. Now for this to work properly, we would need to right click in our folder and we need to create a new file. And what we're going to add is Webpack config.js. I'm going to go back to the grunt file, and we are now going to start by populating our actual tasks. And these tasks are used so that we don't have to manually go and do them. To establish the task, I like to add comments. By the way, I like to use comments constantly throughout my entire development process. And this just makes life so much easier if you need to go back maybe in a week or a month or in a year, you would know exactly what you were doing. So I'm adding tasks to copy HTML files to the distribution. So what we're doing now is we're going to create a task that's going to copy all our files from the SRC folder, and that's going to automatically put it into the distribution folder for us. And this is part of our local dev that we're setting up. So I'm going to create a task, and I'm just going to close the task here. So what I did here is I said gulp.task, and the name of it is HTML. It's a function. Within that, we are going to add a return, and we're going to say return gulp.src. We are going to say src/star.html. So I'm just going to add a pipe as well. So .pipe gulp destination dist /. So what did we do here? We essentially created a task where we said gulp src, so gulp source, src, which is this folder right here, and star.html. So anything that consists or anything that exists with a .html, I want you to move it in this destination. I want you to move it to the dist destination or distribution file. So that's what we're doing with this task. It is super straightforward. Don't overthink this because it is very straightforward. Trust me, once we start playing with this, once we actually execute our code, it's going to make total sense. All right, so we want to do the same for the WebP as well. So I want to start by defining it for my JPEGs first. So WebP conversion for JPEG. And what are we going to do? I'm literally just going to copy this whole task, and that's just going to save time. Once I've copied this, we want to change the HTML to WebP. Also the same, we want to change where it needs to go. We need to change that as well, because obviously we don't want HTML to be copied with this specific task. But what we want to change it to is source img star JPEG. So everything that has an extension .jpeg in the folder of img in the folder of source will be automatically copied for us. In our case, though, we don't have this yet, but as we go through this part of the video, I'll show you how to properly set this up, because we would need to go and create those folders there. Next, we need to change this pipe, and we need to change the destination, and the destination is just going to be as simple as img/. All right, we need to do the same for PNG as well. So I'm going to take this entire task and we're going to copy it and we're going to paste it, change that JPG to PNG. Actually, I want it to be uppercase. I feel like that might be better. And we need to give it a name. So I'm just going to say WebP, but I'm going to add PNG at the end. And now we need to change the extension to PNG because it's not going to be JPEG anymore. But the destination is going to be exactly the same. So that is perfect as it is right here. So now we successfully created another task, which is fantastic. Now the last one I want to add, the last task. So I'm going to take all this, we're going to copy it and we're going to paste it. And we're just going to say WebP conversion. We're going to change our little comment here. I'm just going to say task to bundle JS. And so this task that we are creating, we are bundling everything up, and this is going to be in conjunction with our Webpack config. All right, so one thing I want to change is obviously we are not going to have the source go to img, but we're going to change this so that it goes to src.js and star.js. So anything that's within JS, anything that's within source and JS that has an extension of JS, we are going to make sure that we are moving that to the actual destination. And this one, we are going to change the img, obviously, to JS as well. I think you're starting to realize what we're doing here. Now, one thing I want to add is a console log to make sure that this is doing it properly. So console log is a great way for us, and I'll show you once we put this and once we test it. All right, last thing, we just want to add the Webpack functionality. So within our return source and destination, I'm just going to add pipe webpack config. All right, so now we've created our JS task, and next I want to create a watch that watches for everything. So a task that is going to combine all of this and watch everything for us. So we're going to start by creating a task again. So I'm just going to copy one of these tasks that we already created. I like to be quick and easy when it comes to development. We're going to clean that out. I want to change the actual task name to watch. And now we are going to add gulp.watch. We want it to watch the following for us. We want it to constantly check our source file for any type of HTML changes, so our src HTML, and when it watches, it needs to execute our HTML task. So if there's any changes, it's going to execute this task here at the top. So we're going to go and do this for our WebP as well. So the first one, which is going to be our JPEG. So very similar, gulp watch, src img, same as what we did here at the top. But if anything changes in there, it needs to execute the specific task. Next, we need to do that for our web PNG as well. I think you're starting to understand and get what we're doing here. So I'm going to do the same for WebP PNG, and it's looking for any kind of PNG that's going to be added to IMG, and then it will execute that task for us. Last but not least, we need to do the same for our JS as well. So very similar, we are going to say gulp watch. We need to check everything within the JS. And you would notice that I added extra dots as well. And the reason for that is it's going to check any type of sub directories of JS if there is going to be any, and it will do exactly the same for us as well. All right, so with this said, we created our watch, we are watching, and we are checking these, and based on any type of changes to our folder, we will execute any of these tasks. Last but not least, we need to add a default for our gulp. So gulp and or grunt always needs a default. And I'm going to add this default, and it says gulp task default. What is the default? Well, if I'm executing just the word gulp in the terminal itself, it's going to run HTML. I'm going to get rid of this because that's not relevant. It's going to run HTML, JS, and watch, which is going to be this one right here. So it will run HTML, JS, and watch all at the same time. But in this example and in this video and this full course video, we're not going to really work with this. This is just there for default purposes. All right, so now that we've finished our gulp file, the basics is up and running for the gulp. We need to look at the web config. Now, the web config, again, I'm just recapping here for real quick for people that's just joined or people just seen this video. Everything is in the description below. Everything is within the actual Git pages as well. So make sure to check that out. And you can also fork it, by the way. You can fork this project that I'm creating as well. All right, so the first thing we need to do when defining the Webpack config.js is we need to create a variable for path. And essentially what I'm saying here is const path required path, and that's just a base to kind of get everything going. Next, we need to create a module export functionality. So I'm going to create a export functionality right here, and within that I'm going to define a variable, and this is just a variable that says is production mode equals production. But we're not going to use that just yet. We'll dive into this much later on in the video. But for now, we have our production there, which is pretty standard. Next, I want to create a config. And so I'm going to type out config. I'm just going to close this brackets as well, just so that makes it a little easier. And now I'm going to add a mode. So we're going to say is production and or development is what I'm adding here. We are going to define an entry point. So what are we doing here? Just quickly explain. We are essentially setting up our Webpack config file to look out for an entry point, which is going to be our main.js file. So we would, here in a little while, we would need to go and set up some of these folders that we just created because it's going to look for a main.js file. So we would need to go and integrate that within everything as well. Next, I want to add an output. So we have an entry, we need to create an output. And within the output, we are going to say the file name is bundle.js and the path that I want it to follow is going to be as follow. It's going to be dist.js. Again, stick with me here. I'll explain everything as we go through this. By the way, we just need to add a little P there. Perfect. Last but not least, we need to add the functionality for it to literally be able to convert our SasS to CSS. What we're doing here with Webpack is we are going to run our SasS or CSS within the JS itself. It's super rad. It's super cool because this makes the website super leaner than anything I've ever seen, to be honest. And it's just a great way to manage it. So now this might sound or look a little confusing, but as we go through this project, this is going to make more and more sense. All right, I just want to add a quick array here within our module. I'm just going to open it up here. And what I want to add is the CSS functionality. So I'm just going to say test. Within that, we are going to say use. And we're going to say style loader, CSS loader, and SasS loader. Perfect. Just going to close that down. I want to add a comma here to my array. And we want to add a comma to this one as well. And we want to add a comma to this. All right, so this is the base for everything to work the way it should be working. Now we need to go and add our folder structure. So to add the folder structure, we need to make a few changes here. In the previous part of this video or the previous section, previous video, we set it up a very, very basic Flask Python application, but we need to go and modify it a little bit. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create these folders that we just defined. So in the Gulp, we did create an src img, we created an src.js. So we need to go and modify that because currently when you look at our folder structure, we have src and we have templates within src and we have that HTML within that. So I'm going to take this HTML, I'm going to move it into the actual src by just dragging it. And we're going to delete this template folder because we don't need it anymore. All right, so now we have the src. Next, I want to create a folder and I want to create a folder for SCSS. And I want to create a folder for IMG. So this SCSS is going to reflect with what we just created in Webpack, but we still need to add one more folder, and that is our JS folder. And within the JS folder, we want to go and create main.js. Perfect. So coming back to it and just recapping it real quick, because I know I'm going to lose some people here, but stick with me, trust me. Going back to the Webpack, in the entry point, we did say src.js main.js, which now is src.js main.js. And in the Gulp file, we added HTML, which is src.html. So in our src, we do have this index.html as well as the img. So we created the img folder here. So at this point, we do have the base up and running. Now we need to go and create our SCSS file. So within the SCSS, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it main.scss. Now, if you do not import your SCSS file through the actual JS, you would have a SasS converter, which will convert this into a CSS folder. But we're not going to go that way. We're going to go a different way. Closing this main SasS, we're going to get back to that in a second. The next thing I want to do is import my SasS file that we just created. So going to our main.js, we're just going to type in import, the little single quote marks there, and then we're going to say // we're going to go to SCSS. And at this stage, we are going to type in main.scss and we're going to hit save. All right, so what we're doing here is we're physically in our main.js, we're importing this entire SCSS file, and our web config is going to convert this over from SasS to CSS and put it inside of our dist folder and serve it within JavaScript. So in your index.html, you're only going to import a JS file. You're not going to import any style sheets at all. All right, so let's actually go and do that. So let's go to the index, and what are we going to add to the index? Well, we're going to add the next script. So in the head, we are going to type in script, and we're going to say src, and we're going to add the following. So essentially what I did here is I opened up two curly braces and I said URL_for, so URL for static file name jsbundle.cs. So this jsbundle.cs is what we're going to import into the index.html. This part here is part of the Flask Python functionality. So we're essentially telling it, hey, listen, this is going to be a static file, and we need to import this in. So you'll notice that this JS bundle.js is reflecting with our output what we're doing here. So here we are saying bundle.js, and we're putting it in dist.js. So see how this all kind of comes together now. All right, so with that done, now we've linked up our script, and that's all we need to do, by the way. We don't need to add anything else. We don't need to add a style sheet. We only need to add our JS, and this is why this is so powerful. Again, description below, everything in the GitHub pages. Make sure to copy it, fork this. And by the way, make sure to like and subscribe. I truly appreciate this. There's a lot of effort that goes into these videos. All right, so now that we've completed our index.html, we have configured our Webpack, and we've configured our main.js, we need to modify our Docker container a little bit. At this stage, what we've done is we've copied everything. So everything that's within here is going to copy to our Docker container. And I don't really want that. I don't want that specifically. I just want it to copy our dist file because we don't want anything else to really go and copy. So let's change that up a little bit. So where we had the copy ... we're going to change that. And we are going to say copy dist, and the destination for that dist in the container of Docker itself is going to be app/dist. Again, what we're doing here is we're taking everything that's in this file and we're moving it into the Docker container, but specifically in the app. So the work directory in the app, we have that dist. All right, another thing that I want to copy as well is the app.py file. So we're physically copying the app.py file and moving that in. And the reason we're doing that is because in the previous part of this video, we copied everything, right? We copied everything that was within here, but we don't really want that because that's going to bloat our container. We just want to copy specifically this. Now that we've done that, the last step or the last few modifications that we do need to do for this to work properly is we also need to modify our app.py file just a slight bit. What we want to add here is we need to define the static folder because Python and Flask specifically wants a static folder, and we just need to define and set it to dist. So I am going to add a static folder. We're going to say dist, but I also want to change the src templates because we don't have it here anymore. So I'm going to change this to dist. And so now we're saying template folder is dist and static folder is dist. Everything else is good to go. Now we're going to save everything, done everything that we need to do. And I'm just going to close everything out as well. Next, one last step I want to do before we test this is I want to add a GitIgnore. So we want to add a new file and just say .gitignore. And within the GitIgnore, we just want to ignore the node modules folder. We don't want to submit this into our repository because this can be quite a large file. So all we want to do is just add node_modules and /. That's it. And what that would do is it will exclude our nodes module folder. All right, so the last step and what I want to do before we test is in the actual main SCSS, I just created a body tag and I said background red because I really just want to make sure when we run this that the background is red. That's going to be a great indicator that everything within our Flask and Python and Docker container is working properly and everything is connecting the way it should be. All right, so let's test this out. One last thing, in the package.json, when you open that up, I want to add a specific script here. So I just want to open this up, add a comma, and we want to add a start. And what we're doing is we're going to run the plugin concurrently. We're going to do Gulp Watch and Webpack Watch. So in the terminal itself, we're just going to save that. In the terminal itself, we are actually, I'm just going to close all this terminals. I'm going to create a fresh one or open up a fresh one. And we are going to say npm start. And when you do that, it's going to run concurrently, which is going to be Gulp Watch. And Gulp Watch, specifically, if we open up the Gulp file, is this task we created here. So it's going to do all of this that we just created. And also we have Webpack. So when we open up Webpack, it's going to execute this Webpack code, which is our SasS component, which is going to convert to SasS. Now that we've run this, you will see that it's watching, it's constantly running in the background, which is great. That's exactly what we want. But you're going to notice when you open up the dist folder, bam, it actually created an index folder for us. So it moved the indexed and put it over there. And the JS, it created a bundle for us. And this is development mode, by the way. But one thing I want to show you, which is super cool, it's including our SasS for us, and it's converting everything for us. All right, so now that we've done that, the last thing we need to do, I'm going to open up a new tab here in the terminal, and we are going to run our Docker. And so what I want to do, because we made a bunch of changes to our Docker folder, I'm going to just rebuild our Docker. So we're going to go back to Docker build T yoga fitness. We're going to get that to build real quick. Perfect. And then we're going to run it. We're going to run our Docker by mapping our local repository with our Docker file so that we have that constant refresh. But notice that I've changed here a few things. So you'll see that we have pwd dist and then app dist. So app and dist is within the Docker container. And we are essentially connecting dist, which is right here, to our app dist. And the same goes for our app.py. We are just linking them all up. So I'm going to hit enter. All right, so I just quickly cut here. I had an issue with my Docker. I had to restart my Docker, but I ended up getting it up and running again, and I ran my Docker, and let's quickly test it. Let's navigate to the browser, and you're gonna see, boom, our background is red, which means if we go back to our Visual Studio in our SasS, and we go and modify, let's make this black just to test this. And this is just testing purposes, by the way. I'm gonna go back to the browser and we're just gonna refresh this, and you're gonna see the screen is black. So at this point, we have successfully created our entire environment. We created the Flask, we created the Docker container, we just did everything.